Hey, what's up, Internet? I'm Dan Casey here at San Diego Comic-Con, coming to you with the folks behind FX's Alien Earth. I'm here with Noah Hawley and Samuel Blenkin. First of all, I have to say, congratulations on making an absolute banger of a show. I really, really enjoyed this. It's been my most anticipated show of the year. I want to go back in time with each of you. Alien is such a formative piece of fiction for so many people. And I'm curious, could you tell me a bit about your first memory of encountering this world?
Well, my first memory of encountering Alien was not seeing it because I was invited to a birthday party when I was very young to go see it in the theater, and my parents said that is a terrible idea, and so we went to see The In-Laws instead, which is the Alan Arkin, Peter Falk comedy, and I think that explains a lot about who I am as a storyteller.
Yeah, well, my parents were reckless, and they clearly did not care about my my viewing habits at that age. I saw it at a sleepover, I think when I was about 13 or 14. And like, I can't watch horror movies now. So any like body horror, I'm kind of okay, and like psychological, anything like jump scary and the building of tension in that film, you know, there are images from that film that have stayed with me for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's a psychological thing. It's the darkness, and not seeing the alien is the thing that's where my fear is not knowing where it is.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Like, that is a key memory that is like keyed into me from that age.
It's just so many indelible images and moments, and just the way the tension builds in that movie. You're just waiting for the other shoe to drop constantly.
Yeah.
I want to talk as well, you know, obviously Alien is a very formative text for a lot of people. Is there another sci-fi or genre piece of fiction that really resonated with you on your journey as storytellers and performers?
Yeah, I mean, the first movie I ever saw in a movie theater was 2001, A Space Odyssey. I was 6. But you know, there's something, for a 6-year-old, you're just rolling with it. Primates, now you're in space. That's just a Thursday on the rug, you know? Like, it makes total sense. You don't have to follow it intellectually. So that movie was very, very formative, both in its tone and its pace. And then obviously Star Wars came along and just redefined what science fiction could be.
I was a huge reader when I was younger, and my dad was obsessed with the British TV series of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, very cool.
He would quote characters, you know, like brain the size of a planet and they want me to bring you up to the bridge, that kind of thing. And I read the books obsessively when I was younger, and that kind of, you know, it's only now, it's kind of similar. It's only now, being older, you see the very thinly veiled social critique at the heart of what he was trying to do in those books. You know, I think that's the best thing that sci-fi, that's kind of a key element to sci-fi.
But it's nice as well, because when you're younger, you know, you might not have that, as you mentioned, that awareness of the social critique going on, but they're still just engrossing. They pull you in no matter what. Noah, I'm curious for you. Can you tell me about when the sort of first ovomorph of an idea that became Alien Earth formed in your brain?
Yeah, I mean, FX came to me a few years back, and they said if we could get the rights to Alien, would you have an idea? And if you ask me if I have an idea, I'm going to have an idea. So I did. I had this idea, you know, and these things sort of tend to come fully formed, which was this Peter Pan analogy. It's like, well, what if it's a story about transhumanism, but adult minds are too fixed, and so they start with children, and you know, that idea, it took a while to get the rights, and that idea just continued to grow over time until finally, you know, I was able to start writing, and you know, I think it if we're talking a story, you know, an Alien movie is about the survival of one or two humans, right? You know, this show is about the survival of humanity itself, and the question of, well, does humanity deserve to survive? So much of the movies are about how terrible people can be to each other, often for a profit. You know, you really have to wonder. You have these children who've been put into adult synthetic bodies. They don't have to stay human, right? Human is a choice for them. And so the show is really the push-pull between the good humanity saying, yes, stay human, and the bad humanity pushing them away from human.
One thing that really sort of resonated with me is I love the sort of Peter Pan analogy into this. I love the Lost Boys because they do truly seem sort of lost as to what to do in their brand new bodies, new sensations, or lack thereof in some cases. And with Alien, it's a franchise that's so often, I know, definitely about how bad people have been, but they often place these synthetic characters in a villainous role. So I'm curious, how did you want to approach this to characterize the Lost Boys, and how did you want to differentiate them maybe from some of these synths or cyborgs or other robotic characters we've seen previously?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, one of the things I talked about with Tim Oliphant, in terms of his character is, the jury's really out on is he on our side or not on our side? But, we did talk a little bit about one of Ridley's other movies, Blade Runner, and how those synthetic beings became almost more human, when you think about Rutger's last speech and the emotion of, so that maybe the thing with Tim's character is humanity doesn't appreciate really what the universe is, right? They're too caught up in their own like Neanderthal soap operas and not enough in the full experience of the universe. And I think with the kids, so much of the process of growing up is biological, right? It's hormones, it's, your brain is rewiring itself, et cetera. So if you just take a child and put it in an adult body, how does it become an adult?
Yeah, the processes you'd go through normally just aren't happening, and they can try to simulate them as much as possible, but will that actually be an accurate simulation or just a simulacrum? Right. So, Samuel, I want to talk to you as well because I love your portrayal of Boy Cavalier. He has this really sort of, I don't know, he has this like unsettling, almost feverish energy at times where you can tell he has this like chilling paternalism about these beings he's creating, the Lost Boys. And I'm curious for you, what was your reaction to Cavalier and sort of your way into the character when you first read these scripts?
My first reaction was excitement, just because this is something that I never get seen for, this kind of thing. A character of this size, who has that much confidence, who takes up a room in that way. But Noah and I had a meeting early on, and I was told the same. It stuck with me so much. Noah gave me a great reference of a Twilight Zone episode, which is the one with the boy who is kind of this omnipotent telekinetic overlord of this small village that's kind of been removed from reality, and he runs that kind of world, and he can read people's thoughts, and if you have a negative emotion, he'll sense it and he'll punish you by sending you to the cornfield. And I guess the interesting psychological kind of tension in that episode is that this is a child, similar to what we were just talking about. It's who has not developed a sense of morality and does not have a sense of logic even about the way that the world works. So when you give somebody who, in my case, in Boy K's case, esteems to that kind of childish, impulsive, destructive kind of qualities and sees those as good things, that kind of like disruptor vibe, what are the consequences of that? And it unravels in a really compelling fashion throughout the 8 episodes.
Yeah, I mean when he's reading J.M. Barrie's text in the first episode, it's genuinely haunting because it's just describing his MO about everything, wanting to just control this level of control.
He's going into their minds and cleaning them up. It's creepy.
Yeah.
Does he view himself as Peter Pan, Captain Hook, or the author?
I don't know. The bare feet and the kind of flowy clothes. I don't know. I think there might be a little bit of a Peter Pan feeling in there.
Just to make a parallel with something recently that stood out to me in Superman, you have Lex Luthor who wants what he can't have, this sort of super-powered being. He has everything else. He's a rich man. In Boy K's case, also trillionaire, controlling one of 4 oligarchies, basically controlling the earth. And is his pursuit here to like preserve that a bit of eternal youth that would elude him otherwise?
Yeah, but I think that what he thinks is that he's doing the best thing for humanity. So this is an evolutionary leap forward for humanity.
Of course.
And I guess it's a trait of somebody who has that much power and that much influence, that much money.
He's a you're welcome kind of guy. Yeah.
That is the perfect way to describe it. It's like, well, look what I've done. Come on.
Yeah, well, thank you, and you're welcome. One thing I wanted to talk about is the production design on the show is absolutely bonkers in the best way possible. I wanted to pause every frame because there was so much detail in the background and just faithful recreation, making it feel like it's of the time period of the original Alien, but still it's standing on its own. Mm-hmm. For you, how does it feel walking onto these sets, and how does that inform your performance when you're stepping into this world?
It's an almost surreal level of immersiveness, like that feeling of being immersed in these sets, especially in the research facility that I would call my facility. Like I got to walk around, the corridors are there, the interweaving corridors and the whole rooms and all of the props and stuff. Noah basically made a kind of amazing imaginative playground for us. And so many of the effects being practical as well, Sometimes there wasn't much acting required because it's real, and I think that the fans will feel that as well when they watch the show, that it's so much is practical.
Yes.
I
mean, I was marveling at how seamless the visual effects look, but also it does feel very tactile in a way that I appreciated, because it's always frustrating as a viewer when you're like, this feels weightless in a way that I can't quite put my finger on, but that doesn't happen here unless they happen to be in outer space.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what was the most challenging aspect to crack from working with your production design team to make this feel like the world you envisioned?
Well, I mean, the only alien that we have ever seen, outside of the Genet film, which was far, far in the future, it's Weyland-Yutani is the world. And that design aesthetic, which is so iconic that you would never confuse it with any other sci-fi world, is a Weyland-Yutani aesthetic. And so we're not telling only a Weyland-Yutani story, we're telling primarily a Prodigy story, but that can't look like a Weyland-Yutani world, but it has to feel like Alien. So that was the challenge of it, and there was a lot of time spent trying to crack what that was. It can't be an Apple store, right? Because then it's Star Trek.
Yes.
Right? And so here's this, but so much of Alien is you're in the working class areas. You're the space trucker, you're the grunts, etc. Here you're with the trillionaire, so he's going to show money, but that's where the climate change comes in, because once the planet is hot and wet enough and the seas rise enough, now you're just fighting off moisture at all times. And so we introduced this mold paneling and these mold scrubber characters, these sort of giant pachyderms who hulked in the darkness and sprayed the walls and everything. And it was another element of horror that we could bring into it, was for these children of like moving down these hallways and seeing these figures. I mean, it must be really unsettling.
Awesome. Now, last question for you folks. We're here at Comic-Con. We're Nerdist. We have to ask you a very important question. What do you nerd out about the most?
That's a tough one. I mean, I wish we'd had a bit more time to walk around, but I love Rick and Morty. I'm kind of a big fan of that show.
Well, look, we all know that nerds make the world go round, right? And so my biggest pleasure as a nerd is in the nerdistry of my crew. The gaffer who thinks that the gaffing is the coolest thing that ever existed. The camera operators, our armorer on this show was an encyclopedia of alien armor lore, right? And so, I'm the head nerd to channel all that power, into what the show became. So, I think that's my skill is getting the best out of my nerds.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, the passion clearly shows. Congratulations again. Thrilled for everyone to see it when it finally comes out. So thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate it.
Hey, total pleasure.